Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The X, a podcast about how experience shapes everything from products to services to entire businesses. I'm your host, Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today is our final episode of season 1. What a great 8 weeks. We had a really, really good time. And to kind of wrap things up, we're going to talk again about remote working, but more specifically about the tools we are using and how those tools might change how we all collaborate in the future. Hey man, I after last week talking about remote working, I read this really interesting article about Lake Tahoe. For those who are listening that are not from the Bay Area, Lake Tahoe is east of San Francisco. It's a very beautiful area up in the mountains where, you know, people love to go skiing and boating, and it's just a very pretty area. But there's a lot of people fleeing from San Francisco to Tahoe, and they now have one of the biggest real estate booms they've ever seen. Like people literally knocking at doors, asking people, "Will you please sell your home to me? Will you please sell your home to me?"
Yeah, I mean, all of this is enabled by the fact that people are looking at it, and I think Google is now they've told all their employees that everything's going to be remote until like next summer or something like that. And a lot of the big tech companies have done that, so they're looking at it and saying like, "Hey, this is a great time to buy for a variety of reasons, including the ridiculously low interest rates. Let's go buy in Tahoe because I probably can't buy in San Francisco. So let's make
Yeah, I
something
mean, you
happen."
think they'll stay for good though? I mean, like, I don't know that everyone has fully thought out what Tahoe is like. I mean, in the summertime, it's absolutely like beautiful and warm, and you ride bikes, and it's amazing. But you know, in the wintertime, we've all been up there to go skiing and stuff like that. I mean, it is shoveling snow out of the front of your house and very, very cold. It's just like a different climate from San
Yeah.
Francisco. So,
Well, I
you know,
think I think a lot of the people who are doing this are people who don't necessarily have roots in California. They came from out of state, and they're like, "Oh, I got to experience San Francisco. Let's go experience another beautiful place in California or Nevada." And they haven't lived through some of the insane snowfall that can happen up there. People don't know this. Like, I had a friend who was from Maine, where it's very
uh-huh.
cold, and he loves to ski. And he told his family back home that they would have like 15, 20 foot, 30-foot snow drifts in Tahoe. And they didn't believe him until he sent pictures of these snow drifts that were like over semi trucks and things. And it's like, this is where Donner Pass happened. This is where the Donner Party got snowed in and had to resort to cannibalism. This is not. I mean,
I know.
it's been mild winters recently for whatever reason you might want to think about, but
Yeah.
there's could that doesn't mean that it's not going to turn around and drop 15 feet of snow on you overnight at some point.
That's true. You know, we both have a friend that actually has a cabin up in Tahoe, a beautiful little cabin up near Heavenly, and man, we have so much fun over there. But I went one year because we were going to go skiing and snowboarding, and man, like we had to like shovel some snow out of the driveway and like try to pull the cars in. I mean, it's just something that I'm not used to, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's fun for that moment, but I don't know how much I would love it if I had to do it every day. But you know, the first thing that actually comes to mind whenever I think about that, like moving to Tahoe or moving to these mountainous areas, is internet connection, right? Like
Yeah.
remote working, as we were talking about last week, is all about the pipeline, right? If you have that direct pipeline to your office, to your customers and your clients and things like that, you can do whatever you want. Like my dream of like working from Hawaii, when I was joking when we started last week, is that if you have that connection, it's all good. If you don't, you are cut off and then you can't work. Like you can't do anything. What is your experience with, for example, like the internet up there? Like, have you looked at it or tested it or anything when you were up there visiting?
I mean, most of my experience with that comes from hotels, and hotels are, I mean, they can be pretty spotty. The times that I have stayed in like a VRBO home rental, it's been pretty decent, but it depends, I think, on where you live around the lake. If you're in South Lake Tahoe, where like there's a bunch of casinos and nice houses and things, I think you can do pretty well. If you are somewhere on the outside of that kind of little urban area, then it could become much more spotty for sure.
That's true. And like, you know, I wrote this list because we were talking about it yesterday before we, you know, started prepping for this podcast. And there's a lot of tools, and that's the primary topic today, obviously, that people need to have, especially if you work in the tech industry. And now it's kind of expanding to pretty much everybody, who happens to have the opportunity to work remotely. And I wrote this list here, and I'm sure you can even add to this list, but just think about all the things that we have to use on a daily basis to connect with the variety of clients that we work with. So as I said, obviously a good internet connection. Then we have Zoom, Chime, Hangouts, Skype, Slack, Discord, WhatsApp, Google Apps, Quick, Figma, GitHub, Jira, and Microsoft Teams. Oh my God.
That's just a partial list, obviously.
I know. I know.
I think
And
you just
the
went
list
through
goes
the
on.
list of things that we've had to use. We have to use almost all of them because every client that we work with has different preferences of what they want to use. I mean, not
And
even getting into like Box and Dropbox and those kinds of things either.
That's true. Yeah. All the storage solutions. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times a client will call and they'll say, "Are you guys comfortable with using X, Y, and Z?" And I'm like, you know what? Whatever it is, I'll just spend a couple hours and make sure I learn it, and then we'll use it, because
Yeah.
the list of applications that you and I use is endless. And it kind of feels overwhelming. Like, I get Slack notifications at the same time I'm getting, the GChat
hmm
notifications, and emails are coming in. It's like all over the place. And it's almost kind of easy to miss stuff. I mean, I don't know if you
Yeah.
have that problem.
Well, the fragmentation can be really frustrating, right? So if you're communicating in Slack and you're working in Docs, and then now you're getting links through Slack to go to Docs in order to try to find something, and then the file management system might be a pain, so it could be difficult to find, document number 1352 out of the different things that have been shared with you. There's a lot of opportunity for um, smoothing out the experience, figuring out some of the fragmentation and some of the inefficiency and disorganization that's going on. But I think in the short run, one of the things you're going to see instead is just a lot more players entering the space, and much more products and more fragmentation in the short term.
One of the things I heard the other day was that there was a successful test of Tesla's satellite internet.
Oh yeah.
And the first thing that came to mind was, you know, if you do that, then you're kind of basically enabling someone to work pretty much from anywhere without having any of those weird disruptions that happen when, cable lines fail and things like that happen, or there's big storms and all that kind of stuff. And what that actually does is it kind of take that off the table. And then, like you said, all the investment and time and energy is just going to go into streamlining this process through all these different tools or these new
hmm
tools. I look at all these tools and I can't believe how many new ones have emerged over the last decade. You and I have been working remotely for a really long time. And when we first started, it was basically sending documents back and forth to each other via email and just like attaching PDFs and that type of stuff. And it was hard. And sometimes we'd have a big PDF, remember? And then like we were using Outlook, and Outlook would say like, "Oh, this file is too big. You have to shrink it. We have to find ways to shrink it and everything." Uh, I feel like, and I could be stretching here, but like I feel like email is on its way out. Do you agree?
Well, I don't know if it's on its way out as much, but I think the landscape of how it's used is going to change dramatically. And it's because it's become such a pain in the ass. It's a way for people to reach out and try to sell you things. It's the organization system can be a huge pain, finding applications and files, and it's become so negative that people will try to avoid it. I mean, fundamentally, it's not that different from Slack or Discord or any of these systems. It's just that now it's got this association with spam and all these terrible things that everybody wants to avoid. So psychologically, you're looking for something different, even if it's basically like Slack. Everybody talks about Slack and Discord like there's these crazy new things. I mean, it's just an evolution of a BBS, right? It's kind of the same thing that we've been using for decades. It's just kind of in a shiny new wrapper.
Yeah, I actually got a call from my sister who, she started her business about a year ago or so, and a side business. And the first thing she said is like, "Hey, doing full remote work, like, what should I use? Like, what are the best tools? Like, how do you determine like which ones I should tell my clients to connect with, or how do you evaluate them? What is your kind of analysis of that question? Like if someone came to you and said, hey, I'm going to be working remotely for the first time, and I have all these clients that I typically used to see in person, and now I'm going to be seeing them remotely, like where would you start?
Well, I mean, I would try to set some criteria for what I'm looking for. Number one is if it depends on what's going on within my work environment, right? If I'm like we are, and all of my clients have tools that they've already selected, then I'm going to use the tools that my clients are using. If I'm more in your sister's position where like I might be working with people who don't currently have tools, I would look for things that are really easy to onboard, really easy to understand, that have a desktop and mobile application, so you can use it whether you're on the go or you're sitting in an office. And honestly, I would look for things that were free, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't, if I tell a partner or a client, hey, I'm using this in order to collaborate, get it, I'm going to have a lot more success getting them to adopt that if it's something that they don't have to pay for.
Yep, that's very true. I mean, I end up paying for things over time though. Like one of the things that happens with a lot of these remote tools is that people will ask you to use them, and then like for example, like storage,
Hmm.
and then you'll be uploading like all these videos and things from all your research or whatever it is to the storage, and then suddenly the storage runs out, and then it says, oh, the only way to continue to use this would be to pay monthly or whatever for it. And then you end up having to do that in order to kind of get through the project. Next thing you know, I got another thing that I'm paying for monthly, and I have to remind myself to either
Yeah.
stop it or I go like, should I keep it? I mean, look at simply like one of my favorite tools that we use all the time, DocuSign. Right? That tool has changed our life. We used to have to print out client forms and things like that. We'd have to sign them by hand, then we'd have to scan them, and then we'd have to convert the file, and then you'd have to email it or put it in a shared folder. And now we simply pay whatever it is, $20 a month or something like that for DocuSign. We put all of our documents in there, we click where we want them to sign it, they sign it, boom, done. I mean, that's like a perfect example of a beautiful piece of software that has really made working remotely like tremendously easier, especially on my side because I do a lot of the management of all the paperwork stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I imagine, because of there's just this kind of this psychological weight to having all of these different subscriptions piling up, right? If
Yeah.
you're paying for Box and you're paying for Dropbox and you're paying for DocuSign and you're paying for all these other things, it's just like there's so much going on, and it feels like it just keeps adding on and on and on. It wouldn't surprise me if a company like Amazon or Google or Microsoft or somebody just says, hey, we can provide you a consolidated solution in which you can do all the things that you need to be done. And instead of nickel and diming you for each of the different things, we're just going to charge you a single fee. That is one thing I think that will eventually happen. It'll like kind of become these wall gardens. And I think Microsoft is trying to do that for sure, and a few others are trying to do that. But it's difficult when the marketplace is so fragmented. When you're using one person's using Discord for one thing, another person's using Box, and another person's using Quip or something like that, to get them all within a single kind of walled garden. And a large company like a Microsoft or a Google might, or Intuit, for example, might step in and say, you know what, we're going to give you all this for free for 2 years or something like that,
Yeah.
just to try to get everybody fully into their environment and ideally keep them.
Yeah, Google does a really nice job with that actually because of their all their because you get the storage plus all the applications
Yeah.
plus GChat plus I think they renamed Hangouts, right? It's no longer
Yeah, it's like
Hangouts.
that's one of the issues with Google, right? It's like I can never remember what they're calling it this week. Is it
Uh-uh.
GChat? Is it Hangouts? Is it Google Meet or whatever else they're calling it? And then the I think Google has done a great job as a company as providing these tools, but there's certain things that have really not been ironed out. Like it's so hard to understand an email string that comes in through Gmail, and it can be really weird trying to find a document from 2 weeks ago in Google Docs, right? You have to go into Drive and you look for it, and like it will you try to organize by most recently accessed, and the first documents from like 4 years ago. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense at all. So it's weird to me that they haven't figured that out. Maybe now with this area exploding, they'll put some more resources into figuring that out. But there's some low hanging fruit I see across the board in so many different applications that haven't been figured out.
Well, what else do you see? Like, is there anything else that's come up that you think could be improved?
Well, Quip, for example, which we've only used with certain clients, there's just some basic functionality that's just not available. Like, I can't think of all of it off the top of my head, but there are some things that you can do in Word or Docs when you're working in a document that you just can't do in Quip because they're like, well, we don't think you necessarily need this. So it's a little strange that they haven't been a little bit more full featured. Like, I think it might be something like adding in charts or something like that, or being able to specifically manage like how the look of your document. But there's definitely things I've wanted to do in Quip that is just like, nope, we haven't built that yet. So it's been a
Yeah,
little strange. Like,
yeah,
it does feel a little bit like up till now, a lot of people have stuck their toes in the water,
hmm
but haven't gone hard on really establishing a full, complete experience. And I think everybody's kind
Well,
of
the
has
way
been
it
trying to feel things out up till now.
Yeah, the way it really needs to work is I think all these companies just need to play well together. Like the
Yeah.
reality is the market's big and we use different tools for different reasons. But like if I have something that's in Quip, I should be able to like import it easily into Google, and like Google should be able
Yeah.
to export into a Microsoft file. Like it's it's that old saying, right? Like a rising tide helps all boats or whatever it is, right? Like
Hmm.
I feel like there's so many people and everyone is moving to these tools so rapidly and so fast. They're all going to benefit greatly from it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was just thinking today, like 5 months ago, 6 months ago, when this pandemic began, my parents wouldn't be asking me like, how do I accept this Zoom meeting and how do I get a
Right.
microphone that's better for my computer. And now all these conversations are happening, and they're like having, for example, like play dates with my son and like all this kind of stuff over like our in front of our big computer screen and everything. And
Mhm.
it's like everything is moving so rapidly, and it makes me wonder like, if we look 5 years ahead with all these amazing tools that currently exist, high speed internet, all that kind of stuff, what is the world going to look like with all of these available to us? It's like
Yeah.
Skype saw this happening when it first came out, right? Skype was like one of the first, and they were like, "Hey, this is so great! Like you can click a button and talk to your friend in India or
Sure.
whatever it is." And we fought against it. We were like, "No, like you need to be in the office. We should fly and meet you," and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now everyone's like, "Oh, I love these tools so much."
But it's also weird that, like, when it comes to the different video teleconferencing tools that are out there, it's so weird that Zoom is so much better than everybody else that it's a no-brainer that you should be using Zoom. If somebody sends me a go-to meeting invitation nowadays, I am seriously questioning my desire to interact with that person. You're making me
I,
go back to go to meetings. You're giving me that pain. It's almost malicious.
I haven't even heard that term in quite some time now, so that's pretty funny. But like I got one the other day from WebEx, and I was like WebEx, who uses WebEx? And then I remember that like, oh, there's some seriously heavy security features in WebEx. It's like really good for doing like large scale conferences and things like that. But I forgot about it because so many people just use Zoom or
Yeah.
use Google Chat or whatever.
Well, Skype, I feel like at some point they almost decided to stop improving. I don't know what the deal was. Or GoToMeeting, we had issues where like, all right, well, this just completely drops out. Like it, I've got it. I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm like down the street from Cisco, literally.
hmm
And for some reason, even though I've got 200 up and 20 down, my GoToMeeting or my Skype can't give me a decent audio signal. So it's strange sometimes. And then like you go into Chime, they don't have the virtual backgrounds, or you go into Hangouts and their ability to record meetings isn't very good. So it's like it's so strange to me that everybody else has just dropped the ball.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Honestly, I don't know if it's how the product is built or if it's whether or not they have the infrastructure to handle that level of flow. I know that Zoom, for example, I mean, they went through their challenges where people were Zoom bombing and stuff, so they had to like
Hmm.
change their security features and stuff. But like,
Yeah, but I mean, Zoom bombing to
they,
some extent, that's operator error. That's like, hey, if you send out your invite to 60 people, guess what? It's going to make its way onto a 4chan board, right? Just don't
yeah,
do that. It's
probably,
not what
yeah.
it's for.
Yeah, I mean now I think it's great because it just says like this person wants to join, click accept, and then you
Yeah,
click accept, right? So you're hand selecting each person. But like I feel like the way in which it was designed, the UI, the area that we work in, right, the user experience is just really good. Like
it
it's
is.
so simple. I know where everything is. Like my mom figured it out in like a couple of minutes, and she doesn't work with these tools very often. So I'm like, wow, okay. So they just kind of figured out the UX, and from there it kind of drove this massive, massive
Yeah.
adoption.
There's room for improvement for sure, which Zoom found absolutely when it came to like now we're trying to use Zoom to handle like 30, 40, 50 people in a classroom, which is not really what it was designed for. But they figured things out like the waiting room and restricted access and things like that. And there's other things that I think that they will continue to figure out, like chat integration could be handled much better, if especially if you're doing a screen share of a chat message comes in. How do I get to it quickly and easily and respond to it while I'm still in my screen share or have viewing somebody else's screen share? So things like that, I think will continue to improve. One of the things I think when you start looking at the different tools that are out there, some of them feel like they're thrown at as afterthoughts, or they feel like they have been successful, so they don't necessarily need to continue to improve, which I call like the Photoshop problem. Um,
Uh
I
huh.
think that now that this area is exploding, people will finally start diverting some resources to those tools, and hopefully we'll see them improve.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, this seems to be like the next phase or like the final nail in the coffin for decoupling from the office. Meaning, like, the office has its value. Trust me. Like, going in,
Absolutely.
seeing people, sitting down, collaborating, whiteboards, lunches, celebrating, milestones and events. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love all that stuff. But
Hmm.
this is the kind of last piece that once it's fully worked out, no issues, you can work anywhere you want and still be very successful, still get promoted, still be part of the bigger org and do well. And it just is a matter of making sure that all these things are kind of dialed in. The other thing too is like I feel like these companies, because they're doing so well right now, they're going to drive the next phase of investments in the stock market, right? You're already seeing like huge pops in companies like Slack and of course Google and things like that and others. But like this is the next phase. Like this is a very early growth. Like you said, there's going to be more tools, more features,
Yeah.
greater expansion. Do you agree? Like, are we on the beginning of something that we've been using and know about for the last decade, but now the rest of the world, maybe that doesn't necessarily work with them on a daily basis like we do, is now going to be part of it the way that we are?
I think so, and I think one of the reasons for that is we're being catalyzed by a series of natural disasters, basically from a pandemic to wildfires to hurricanes hitting, and what that is going to ultimately, what that is catalyzing is this transition to remote work or even using these tools, even when you're in the office, to connect you to other offices. And now that the tools are improving because of the additional attention to it, the infrastructure will be improving. We'll have more redundancy built into it. It's going to be enabled, and the experience is going to be significantly improved for the people that are working and the people that are supervising. Not to mention the economic incentive in order to make this happen to help save money on smaller offices and things like that. It's now that the ball is rolling and they get better tools and there's more satisfaction, it's going to keep rolling down the hill. It's going to gain more steam, I believe.
Yeah, there's some other things going on too, some other bigger things that I wanted to talk about, and that's conferences. Okay. So a lot of conferences went quote unquote virtual this year,
Hmm.
and some of them were extremely successful. And then the ones that everyone's kind of aware of, like the DNC and the RNC and stuff like that, are having virtual versions of their conventions, some more than others. But the thing is that between YouTube and Vimeo and these conferencing tools and the ability to kind of stream live simply onto these different platforms like Roku and all that kind of stuff. I am starting to see. Here's what happens when there's a lot of success on doing something that way, which is logistically a lot simpler and costs a lot less money to do. People tend to stick with what works. So, do you actually think that in the future, as we move forward, we're going to see either a modified or a full version of remote kind of forever for a lot of these conferences, whether it be tech conferences or political, gatherings, things like that?
Well, I think remote has been around for a while, especially when it comes to like attending conferences. So you can watch like a breakout panel or something remotely. Even with like Comic Con was kind of pushing that forward. With now you can watch the Marvel panel remotely. But the tools have always been kind of not quite there yet. And I think that it will now become a bit more of a mainstream thing because it's worked out so well, especially for the DNC, where you can have speakers who might have extremely expensive security needs, like a president or a presidential candidate, where you're now saving massive amounts of money by allowing that person to speak remotely, and then that I think will kind of create a need to provide a mixed environment in which some people are there in person and some people are attending remotely. So you can get more people who might be high value remotely attending because they don't have to worry about the all the logistics of travel and security and all those kinds of factors. At the same time, in order to really keep up with what a conference experience really can be, they're going to need to see some new technologies emerge where you now have higher quality or more immersive experiences. And it wouldn't surprise me if you saw things like VR attendance or holographic projections for speakers, kind of, and other kind of honestly kind of off the wall, slightly crazy stuff. And some of them will hit and it'll work, and some of them won't. But there's going to be a period where people are going to be trying things out, and it'll be really interesting to see how people respond to it and how well it's integrated.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got a phone in their pocket, right? And everyone's got,
Yeah.
for the most part, a TV at home. And if you have an internet connection, I mean, that means you can live anywhere in the world and you get to watch these conferences and learn from them and be educated by them, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't see any reason why it wouldn't head in that direction, except for kind of that old saying that you and I used to have, which was like, we pretty much close a deal for our company every single time we're in person. Like we
Yeah.
would go out to lunch and talk to someone and then really work on like how we can partner or work together, and it always seemed to work out when we were in person. And then when it's over the phone or it's over a video call, it's like, I don't know, like 60-70% of the time maybe it would work out. And I'm wondering if that's still going to be true, or if we're just kind of moving away from that and things are just going to be remote, right? Because like our clients, for example, they don't want to meet in person, obviously.
Yeah.
And if we're doing software, there's no reason why we don't just hop on a video call and talk to one another. But if it's hardware, they can just mail it to us, and then we can do our testing or our evaluations and mail it back to them.
Well, I think you bring up
So
an interesting point. I think where the difference comes in is whether, for us, like you look at this year, and we haven't seen a client in person since I think February, and we've had more demand than we've ever had. I don't think that would have been possible within our first 2 or 3 years of work. So I think what it does is it will provide additional advantages for companies and people who are already well established, who already have all of their connections, who already have their reputation established. It's going to be more difficult for example, new service companies, for people who are lesser known, to break in because it'll be more. It's going to be more difficult for them to get those in persons in
that's a
order
good
to
point, right?
establish
Like
the relationships.
if you're just getting started, then it's really hard to do video chats and really try to pitch. You have to be like a really good pitch person to be
Hmm.
able to like hop on a video call and not be sitting with someone and feeling that energy and like trying to like walk them through like your process and what you offer and that kind of stuff. This is going to be a very interesting time for pitches.
But at
Um,
the same time, one of the things I'd point out is that some of our biggest, most established companies who've paid us the most over the years, there's one in particular that I can think of where we've never met a single person from that company in person that we didn't already know.
True. You're 100% true. And they're the ones that we love working with the most. And
Yeah.
one of the ones we love working with the most. And Yeah, they have. Well, I think I asked them. I said, do you want us to come in, come in person or whatever? And we can sit down and talk about this. They're like, nah. Then we have to get a badge. We have to do this. We have to do that. Like, let's just hop on Zoom. And I was like,
Yeah,
this was before the pandemic, and I was like,
yeah.
very smart, right? You're saving yourself time and energy, and
And we've also
all
had
that
quite
stuff.
a few smaller, small to medium business size companies or startups who, I mean, we haven't done a ton of work with them, but like we've also only met them virtually. So it's entirely possible that the goalposts will change and it will
Hmm.
become completely normal for somebody who's kind of fresh faced to step into the industry and establish themselves completely virtually.
Yeah. So, with that said, I'm wondering now if there is any ideas about investments. So, a lot of people have asked me this. They said, like, hey, a lot of people are investing into remote tools right now. What would you invest into based on your experience of like actually using the products on a regular basis? And the one that keeps coming to mind is Slack, only because I guess so many people are using it. I think that's a
Hmm.
pretty good one. Um, Zoom, obviously, I think is going to be here to stay forever and stuff. Any other ones come to mind that you think would be good long term investments for people who are interested in kind of being part of that growth?
Well, this one's always tricky because you also take into account the other things that could be going on within the company. I think this is low hanging fruit, obviously, but Amazon with AWS, if they expand some of their offerings into kind of work productivity services and things, they have a great opportunity to provide a kind of holistic, streamlined experience that that leaks over from AWS into the more productivity type products. I think Microsoft is putting a lot of money and investment into providing a holistic experience like that. I'm looking at the people who are going to step in and provide that Apple type of experience where you never have to leave their ecosystem for
Okay.
work. And I
Uh
think
huh.
there will be somebody like a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon who will establish that. They might acquire Slack or Discord or something like that, or just knock them off because it's not really that hard to knock off Slack and provide that, and then you'll see whole corporations kind of buy into it. It could be Salesforce too. They actually provide quite a few things that I think a lot of companies like and take advantage of, and they're also very accustomed to kind of customizing their interfaces for their clients. So
Yeah.
they could very well be that company who will do it. I think the thing to look for is who's going to step in and provide either acquire Slack or provide that Slack competitor, because I think that is going to be the backbone for everything moving forward.
Is there anything that you can't do right now remotely that you wish you could do? I was trying to think
Uh,
of this. I was like, I don't know that
yeah,
there's anything I
hardware,
can't do.
hardware.
Okay.
So hardware testing, prototyping, development. Like you need either a workspace or some way in order to very quickly and efficiently ship it around the country, or some kind of VR tool, a remote tool that can provide some kind of haptic system, right? So we've seen things like this of like maybe thinking off the wall kind of stuff, and we've actually seen some things along these lines from some of the companies we've worked with, where you could do like a laser scan of a hardware proto and then do a quick print on the other side. So if they're working on a hardware prototype in somebody's garage in California, they can then scan it and then print it out in Boston, and then somebody in Boston can actually get a feel for the ergonomics, the size, the weight of what that
Man,
product
that
is.
was that was the dream. I mean, it was like what I think it was 10 years ago when you and I were analyzing the those first kind of home 3D printers that were looking pretty good, pretty
Hmm.
promising. And one of the use cases on it was that it was like, hey, we came up with this design, and then the electrical engineers in Boston, like you said, and then you click print, it prints. They wake up the next morning, it's there. They kind of shave it, clean it up or whatever it is, and start adding their components to it. And
Yeah,
then from there, they can test it or whatever it is. Yeah, I haven't heard too much about that though lately.
yeah.
Um,
I think that working on physical products, hardware, and down the road construction is going to be the final frontier for remote work. That will be the last thing that will kind of become remoteized.
Well, I mean, also too, like there might be a little bit of a downturn in small to mid-sized companies working on hardware.
Hmm.
It's a little harder right now to do that. And I just wonder if it's going to be more challenging for things to get built and tested and, shipped and all that, because you're physically touching things and having to get them into retail or whatever it is. There might be a little bit of a slump there.
And there's so the for hardware technology devices, it's so saturated. It's hard to see where there's going to be a lot of opportunity for new products to come in. I mean, drones and VR might still hit. We might still see some AR tools come out at some point. But most of the time when I talk to people, they tell me like, no, I own too many devices. There's too many things to charge. There's too many things to manage. There's too many
Yeah.
interfaces I have to remember. A lot of people are looking to simplify.
Yeah. And when you look to simplify, what do you want to do? You want to pare down and try to combine everything, right? So it's like I saw this picture a while back and it showed like all the things that were on your desk in like 1990, right? When you're at work, and how 80% of them have been put into your phone.
Yeah,
From cameras to scanners to printers, because you're not really printing, you're just kind of shifting things back and forth. Microphones, it's like everything is getting placed into the phone, and now the desk is literally a laptop. For us, a microphone, because we're doing these recordings, but like a laptop, maybe a keyboard and a mouse if that makes you feel more comfortable, and then your phone. There's really not much else you need anymore, especially if you're working in
sure.
our industry.
Yeah, we were not that far from some evacuation zones during the fires, and I was looking at it like, what do I really need in order to keep working? I could throw it all into a laptop bag and have everything I need. To be
Correct.
completely
Yeah.
honest, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. I mean, I don't want to have a million things that I need to use
Yeah.
on a daily basis to get my work done. So for me, like this consolidation and kind of seeing these tools get streamlined has been amazing.
Hmm.
But I think this is a great time for us to kind of wrap up. We've done 8 episodes this season. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had a really good time doing this and kind of digging deep and kind of talking about this stuff from the perspective of people who test these products on a regular basis and kind of live in this environment. How was your experience since we started this?
No, it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, we're new to this, so we're still kind of learning. We're finding our tone and way of getting comfortable and talking, but it's been a lot of fun just kind of getting our thoughts out and our ideas out, and just between these conversations between the two of us. And I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say when they hear these podcasts and hear what we're saying. And I'm also really excited for next season. I think we have talked about some fantastic topics that we will have a very interesting and fun time getting into.
Yeah, and also too, just so everybody knows, next season we are going to have some guests on. So for this season, we wanted everyone to, kind of get to know Demetrius and I, and kind of how we think and what we do and what we work on. And then starting next season, we're going to weave in a couple of guests. And these may not be just the typical guests that you see on other podcasts that kind of go through the circuit there, but people who are specialists in different areas that Demetrius and I have met over the years that can give us insight into different topics in different areas that maybe you haven't heard about or you haven't had the opportunity to research or explore. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I wanted to thank everybody for this season. If you've been listening, this has been a lot of fun, and we will see you, I think, in about 3 months on the next season.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.